Amy and I spoke a few months back about how can we help the members of COO Forum really tell their story as COOs. And this doesn't pertain to whether you're looking for a job or not. It's really about how are you expressing your value as an operation executive within your company. And so Amy has got a long list of accolades in terms of her expertise. And so I don't know if I could have found anyone better. So I'm excited to have Amy here. I'm going to read a little bit off of our invite. Let's see here. This is really about describing your wins, the brands, and your professional experience. And so it's how to communicate that as a COO. And so some of our key takeaways is actually helping you to align your brand with the goals of your organization. So it's not running counter, but it's running with. Developing a framework to tell your COO story and managing your executive assets. I like that one. I need my executive assets managed better. Amy is president of Five Strengths Career Transition Experts and specializes in resume writing for executives and their teams. She's got so many accreditations. I don't know if I have time to get through all of them, but nationally certified online profile expert, LinkedIn strategy certification, certified master resume writer, certified executive resume master. She's been a judge in Career Directors International's Toast of the Resume Writing Industry Award since 2015, having placed first and third place for Best Executive Resumes. She's also the author of Courageous Career Change, Fearlessly Earn the Executive Role You Deserve. And I'll make the offer to everyone on the call today. If you'd like a copy of Amy's book, just please message me, leave it in chat, or send me an email and we'll get that book out to you. And she's won many other awards, holds an MBA from Boston College and a BA from Franklin Marshall College. Yeah, Amy, what do you think about that for an introduction? Are you ready?
I'm ready. Thank you. That was so super kind.
Yeah, all right, take it away.
All right. I'm going to hit my own timer here. All right. Hi, everybody. It's so good to see you all. Thank you so much for having me, Chuck. Thank you, Fiona. Thank you for hosting me today. I'm so glad to be participating in the COO Forum presentation program, I guess. And I should probably hit share on this thing so I can get my slides going. How about that? How does that work? Everyone can see everything? All right. So this is me. This is today's presentation. And let's get started by thinking about the following. Operational excellence runs your company, but your executive narrative runs your career. I'm going to say that again. Operational excellence runs your company, but your executive narrative runs your career. I work with COOs and senior executives like yourself because these individuals have such interesting branding to deliver and career stories to tell. But almost down to a person, they have no idea how to make that happen, how to describe that executive narrative that should run your career. So as the kind introduction explained, my name is Amy Adler. I run Five Strengths Career Transition Experts. And today we're going to explore how you translate that operational excellence that you all bring to the table into a powerful executive narrative. This is the plan. This is what we're going to do today. Take a deep look at brand building for COOs. In this workshop and lecture element, you'll develop a comprehensive understanding of your unique role as a COO in the context of all the structural shifts that are hitting you probably from all sides and defining and redefining what that chief operating officer looks like, right? So today, this is our plan to present ways to understand the kind of COO you are with respect to your executive team and all the stakeholders you'll hear me mention multiple times. To create a pathway for you to translate that COO level expertise into the kinds of narratives that are going to resonate with the C-suite and with the board, from describing all the things you do at a granular level and that have KPI measurements associated with them, all the way to the broader impact of your choices and your wins. And last but not least, we'll talk about managing those executive assets and delivering and demonstrating that kind of expertise throughout a couple of different types of contents that resonate, of course, with that level and shift from a pure focus on here's what I do every day to this broad outcome focused kind of a narrative that speaks to who you are and what your brand really is. So insofar as a lot of you seem to have addressed your resume in the last handful of weeks to months, or maybe not at all, hopefully you'll have a copy of your resume and or your LinkedIn profile on hand, because you're going to need at least some of those things for the workshop elements of today's program. So who doesn't get this question, right? Nice to meet you. What do you do? And that usually makes people stop and stare and look wide-eyed at the person who's speaking to them. And most people answer this question with, I work for a company that does something. And that's true. You all do that. But if an answer like that is more like an announcement of the mechanics of getting up and every day you go to work because that's what people do when they have an employment. So there's certainly more than we could say than I work for this company. The next level might be something like, I am a COO. And I think deep in your hearts and in your knowledge banks and all that, you know what you do every day. But your audience might hear C-suite something and concoct an image for you that might or might not represent the things that you actually do. So they might imagine that you're taking people to lunch, or you're sitting behind a big desk, or you've got a corner office, or I don't know, whatever it is they think they do. Or that whatever it is they think you do. But of course, what you know about what you do is probably profoundly different. And while you're thinking about all of the granular details, maybe you're talking to your CFO about something, or you're trying to find time to meet with your CEO, or you're looking at some kind of quarterly report, or you're trying to handle a problem in manufacturing, or whatever it is, that's what's underpinning all the things that you do every day, and kind of in a cloud of the response of what do you do every day. But the answer to what you do is somewhere in the middle of all of this. And it's by no means a simple list of responsibilities. You know, I want to tell a story. Recently, I was reading the COO Forum's State of Operations report because, you know, now I'm kind of on the, yeah, exactly. And I was particularly struck by a comment in it that says COOs are now at a point of real inflection, shifting from that granular daily management of execution to a real powerful innovation and leading organizations to scale and at scale. And I think what that means to me is that my experience with my clients, and I've been doing this kind of work for almost 17 years now, that's not my only data set. To hear that this message is pervasive and it's external to me and coming from all of you, I think it just corroborates that it's harder to define a brand when everything is always changing and everything is always moving faster. And you're trying to catch up with what you're putting out there because you've got so many responsibilities and so many points of authority that you have to manage. So if you're going to define your COO role with respect to your job description, that's certainly a place to start. And everybody, you probably have this tucked away someplace, the thing that you were hired to do. But I will tell you, I recently did a quick look on Indeed, sorry, not on Indeed, on LinkedIn, not on Indeed, on LinkedIn, to see how many COO roles were out there and what they were putting out there as requirements. And it turned out I found that there were more than 5,000 COO opportunities in the US alone. This is just now. And I started to go through some of them, obviously not all 5,000, just to get a comprehensive look of what I thought I could sort of concretely write down in terms of job expectations for the COO roles. But after a handful, you can imagine I gave up and I started writing down some of the things you're seeing on the screen. These are only representative, a handful, a small percentage of the literally hundreds of possible requirements that make up your roles. And that's you put these all together and you can have thousands of combinations. And if you overlay your industry expertise, then you're going to have something even more. There's going to be infinite possibilities of combinations of requirements of particular expertise for the assets that, the skills that you're bringing to the table, the assets and your experience and all the elements that make up your COO role. So it's going to be this massively complicated um, and multifaceted experience for you that is very hard to narrow down into a brand. And I think we can all agree that this is not the easiest thing in the world to do, because whatever your combination of assets and skills are, and whatever context you're experiencing them in, these are yours. They're not going to be like anybody else's. There's 5,000 opportunities out there, and they all have, hundreds of data points. So what you do every day is part of your executive brand, but by far not the entire thing. You are so much more than your daily duties, honestly, and so much more than what your job description was that got you hired into the role to begin with. And this continues to be true as the ground shifts and your role becomes more complicated and the market becomes more volatile and everything becomes more ambiguous. A COO with whom I was recently speaking said, sort of in the context of our work together, that being a COO was like, quote, wiring the plane while flying it. He was British, so he had this sort of nice way of putting it. But another individual with whom I was working kind of gave the same message. Maybe it's a transportation theme, I'm not sure, that it was building the track while driving the train. So all of this overlaid together means to me that it's finding the direction and creating the structure and moving the business forward, whether it's new systems or legacy systems, whatever it is, and all of this trying to make the company work more effectively. And it's not easy, again, to encapsulate that beyond kind of what you are handling at the moment, and I respect that. And it's the reason that figuring out a concise statement around this is so challenging. So if we probably have 10 or 15 folks in the room right now, we're going to have 10 combinations of experiences and responsibilities. And now we're talking, again, thousands of points where we can all have points of differentiation, points of distinction, and what makes each of you unique. So I'm going to credit Chuck, of course, because when we were preparing for this talk, he reminded me of the Harvard Business Review article called Second in Command. You probably all know it. And if all of the skills and experiences that I was just describing a second ago, if those are the x-axis, then these archetypes that are on the screen from this article, this is the y-axis. And your job is somewhere in here, and you could have z-axis and a-axis and b-axis. Anyway, it's super, super complicated. So I've worked with somebody recently who self-described as the executor. He was clearly a second set of eyes and ears, and super hands-on, because his COO was always doing something else and always stretched so thin. So that was his role. I talked with somebody recently. She said she was the change agent. She was the visionary. She was the innovator, the business driver, driving all these radical business shifts in her company. And those are on the super exciting positive side. And I was thinking about it in the context of everything that's been happening in the employment marketplace these days. I mean, that sometimes COOs, and you'll have to tell me, have authority or leadership over over the HR element of their business. And when demands change and there are rifts, this individual is the buffer between what's happening on the ground on the front line, what's happening in the C-suite, and what's happening at the board. It can't possibly be an easy position to be in. So these are all super complicated facets of these roles. Oh, and I should tell you also about another individual with whom I worked. He was just in the last, 6 months, promoted to a dual COO and president role. So he was effectively his own business partner, which it was good that he was a veteran of his business and he knew the organization really, really well, and that he had a ton of experience building so many of the structures that made the business work, that he rather self-described as an operational architect, because he was so focused on maximizing that system design and reducing sort of the friction in the business and kind of managing all the complexity that came with this newly elevated position that he was in. So your position might be any one of these. It might cross lines. It should cross lines. And if your brand is still a collection of data points. It's true, right? You have the foundation, you have the raw materials, but that's still not a brand. It's still not something that you can easily represent to your team or your COO, to your board, and to the marketplace. Okay, what's going on in the chat? Oh, so everybody wants, if you are not a COO, you do not know what that means. Okay, so true. New requirements adding every day. And a lot of members that function as CFO. Yeah, that's the really interesting thing about, I'm just sort of reading down the chat. COO to me is so interesting because it has so many definitions and there's just not any one. And even for an outsider, when I hear somebody leans into tech or leans into finance or leans into something else, I'm always surprised by that or excited by that. And Josh says, this is a web of my position. Okay. Any thoughts, questions as we move on? Because we're gonna hit it hard right now. All right, let's go. Now let's talk about yours, right? Because yours is unique. And if you're going to assess your own brand, it's not just these questions. It's how do you fit in, given your role and given all that you bring, how do you fit into your company? And how do you make that make sense so that you can convey it easily to somebody else? And how do you shape that message so that you're improving the alignment, and you're locking in, honestly, this crucial external confidence that either your investors make up or your market, your potential clients, whoever it's going to be. All of this, I love that I'm seeing nodding. I feel like I'm striking a chord here. That all of these things have to match, and if you still get to own who you are and what you do, but of course it's in the context of your company, and that's the reason you have this title, right? So if you broaden that lens, we can address brand building or brand analysis or statement at a more strategic level and talk about what that is with respect to your executive leadership and all these stakeholders we keep talking about. So let's look at an example. This is not a real person. I want to make that really, really clear. I would never share private information. So the examples that I'm making up now are completely fictional. On the left, we have somebody talking about the stuff that they do. And if this were a real client of mine, I would have been super pleased that they thought to put in the KPIs that they did, and that these are the things that matter to the company, whatever they are. This is, again, just an example. But if this is all that they do, then they are kind of stuck in this feedback loop of just reporting. And that gives a perception, if you will, that they are a functional leader, a task-oriented leader, somebody who understands execution, but not really what their strategic impact might be, or at least they're having trouble conveying it. Maybe they know in their soul and the depths of their knowledge about themselves, but conveying that can be very, very difficult. So what I hope is when they get to the point of being able to talk about these things that are on the right, that they can elevate that message and get it away from the sort of day-to-day thing, whatever happened in the last week, whatever the most recent thing is that they did, and into something that a statement that magnifies or illuminates the kind of impact that they have across the board. And that is a persistent kind of a brand that, again, is not just what happened in the most recent quarter or whatever it is, but is something that will last over time and that people will know them to be this kind of a leader. And once they get to that point, at the bottom, this is where it is important for people to narrow in on in kind of in one statement who they are and what they stand for. So it's going to be a combination of all those skills, all those expertise, data points, as all the KPIs, and a type of archetype or an amalgamation of those archetypes. I hope it's not just one person or one type, and everyone's assigning themselves to one thing, because I think it's more complex than that. But if that's the case, you can demonstrate quickly, easily to the people who matter what you are and what you do. And this statement will filter into all the kinds of assets that you're going to write about yourself with respect to that. So let's roll now into a bit of a workshop component to this presentation. To help you deepen your understanding of your own executive brand, we're going to run a bit of an exercise using your favorite GPT. So not necessarily the greatest tool, but I can't help with everybody in the same, in the context of this meeting. And I like the idea that these prompts that I'm going to provide for you, the ones that I built for this conversation, can be a thought partner in a meaningful way. So in this context, I hope you'll think about yourself not just from your resume and your LinkedIn, which you'll need for this exercise, but also a question that I always ask my senior execs to think about, which is, how would somebody else describe your performance? It's so hard for us to talk about ourselves from inside our own skulls, but when we think about how we exist in this ecosystem of other people and other stakeholders and what they think of us, we get a better perspective. So if this exercise can serve as a proxy for those people, as a thought partner, you're well on your way. And you can take this prompt and use it again and again with different approaches to see if you can get to that 360 degree view. Thank you, everybody, for sharing your stories. I know some of these are deeply personal and near and dear to the way you think about yourself. So I appreciate that you were willing to offer up to us in kind of private session what this means to you. So anyway, moving forward, now that you have this body of knowledge, and again, pretty quick, high level, but a place to start. Just hang on to that. Don't close the window just yet, because we're going to go back to it with something else in just a little while. But for now, let's pivot just a little bit. Let's pivot just a little bit to the kinds of things that you can do with this information that you now have about yourself. Let's talk about where the information that you've generated, where that can live. And for the purposes of today's conversation, we're going to talk about how that translates into 3 types of executive assets: your executive bio, or maybe a board bio, as we were just talking about, your LinkedIn profile, and your personal website. Or not in that order, though, but we're going to talk about this because you have to have this content someplace where it's going to be broadcast out to your board and your peers and the market. And this brand that you're building for yourself should be pervasive through all these things. So we're going to go over each of these again. We're going to start with the executive bio, touch on what it means to have a website for yourself, and then lean into LinkedIn because it's the biggest thing out there, really. And we'll workshop that a little bit as well. You'll notice that none of these are your resume. And we're not really going to talk about resume writing today at all. I don't think that you shouldn't have a resume or that you shouldn't update your resume, but I want you to have a portfolio of documents that you feel comfortable sharing in a very public way. So all the people, like if it was shared without you, you wouldn't be worried about protecting private information. So it's not that these can't support a job search. They certainly could, but that's not today's conversation. Chuck, what? You might have to re-interview for your own job. That's funny. Okay, so let's start here. Your executive bio might be the first introduction your audience has to you, whether they're a stakeholder of some type, or an investor, or a conference attendee. This might be the first way they learn about your leadership style and what your COO brand is. So it's an identity statement and a sort of a high level assessment of the wins you just harvested from that exercise that we were just going through. And they become, in a lot of ways, the basis for this bio. So we don't have a ton of time to workshop this here, but I wanted to give you a structure that you can follow. So when you're doing this offline, you have a pattern to follow that you can build this yourself. So if you think about the executive bio in the way of, say, of the 5-paragraph essay that we were all taught about in middle school. Obviously, it's not a 5-paragraph essay, and you're not in middle school, but it's a good structure, a good sort of skeleton for the process. And the first paragraph, if you will, of the 5 paragraphs or so, is going to be this introduction to your brand. So the things that you were just learning about yourself or reinvesting knowledge in the prior exercise, that archetype, the strategic value to your C-suite peers, your board, your investors, your customers, that is what shows up in that first paragraph. If people fall off after that, they'll know everything there is to know about you and what you are bringing to the table, to the organization, to the, I don't know, the milieu, whatever the environment is you're sharing this bio in. So paragraph, not very long, a couple of sentences, maybe 5 sentences, will get you there quite nicely. Then in the same metaphor of the 5-paragraph essay, if we go to paragraphs 2 to 4, we'll get a little bit of a narrative about each of your roles, starting from the most recent and working our way backward. Because even though your story obviously goes in the way that time does from the beginning to the end, your audience is going to care most about what you've done recently. So you're helping your audience in these cases. Again, this is a fictional person. I wouldn't put anybody's real stuff out there. Helping your audience understand how you fit into your company, what your big wins were, and how they relate to the brand that you're bringing to the table, the COO that you are, that you intend to become. I would say, insofar as there are a fair number of KPIs in this, once again, it's not I did this, I did this, I did this. It's a story not of sort of your functional capability, but the way that you do what you do and how that plays out for your organization, and how you are illuminating what your company does to a broader audience. I think that's very fair to say that. And once you get through all of these, you have the 5th paragraph of the 5-paragraph essay. And it doesn't have to be 5. You could have more roles. I'm not suggesting that you limit yourself there. But the 5th one in this metaphor, I like to wrap up with something a little more personal. It humanizes the audience, or you to the audience, and enables you to talk about something slightly more, like where you live, where you went to school, what you do in your spare time, what your passions are outside of work, that kind of a thing. It's just a nice way to complete that, so that you are giving a whole, like, again, 360 view of yourself as a leader, as a person, somebody they can really connect with. Any thoughts about the bio before we jump into something else? Humility is not my risk. Oh no, Connie. Thoughts, questions?
So I don't have a question about the bio, but
Oh,
in the earlier deck that you had about your
yeah.
business search, your job search, and you had your portfolio of artifacts to bring to the table. What I found missing was, and to me, the most important is the network.
Ah, interesting. So that's a whole, that could be like 3 other conversations, right? That's a whole other thing. And there are definitely ways and things that you should be bringing to the conversation that uniquely center you as part of a wider network that is important for your company. It's important for you professionally. It's important for your team. It's important for your industry. I don't want to discount that at all. But to be fair, that's not a written asset. And if you want to talk about it, I would be delighted to do so. Let's find a time. But and because I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm not saying you're wrong. It's just, it's not this particular thing and not part of today's plan
Fair,
per se. But
fair.
I
I
fully
would say
respect, fully
from an
respect.
accounting perspective, it's not a physical asset, it is an intangible asset.
It's an intangible asset, no doubt.
And that's why it's on the equity side of the balance sheet, because it
You name
drives real value.
Yeah, again, I'm not saying that's not valuable. It's just a different topic. But thank you for raising it, because we should all be attending to that and thinking about it. All right, let's talk about something that maybe not a lot of people have, which is a website devoted exclusively to you. Does anybody here have a website for themselves? I'm curious. Nope. All right. This is going to be a little different then. You've probably seen plenty of websites devoted to people. And the neat thing is that you get to own the whole thing. So the typical, HTTPS:// your name, your domain, whatever it is, .com. And as I'm saying this, I'm wondering if you're all thinking what on earth you might need this for if you already have a LinkedIn profile. Question I get, oh, yes, okay. Chuck suggests that creatives have portfolio websites. Absolutely true. A little bit different. We can talk about what it means to do that. It's not quite, it can be the same thing, not quite the same thing. So the difference between a LinkedIn profile and a website that you design for yourself is that this is a place where you can wholly represent your brand from your own perspective, adjacent to and maybe overlapping with what your company is doing or what your CEO is doing, what your board is doing, but a spot where you can sort of own that and not be terribly worried that it's hopefully that it's going to step on somebody else's toes on that in that sense. And if you are going to build a site like this, and it might not be right for everybody, but I can't discount that it's important here. If you're going to do it, it's because you want to be doing something different from what you should be doing on LinkedIn, that it has a different purpose. It's not just a repeat, or it's not just a rehash of what's already there. So let's talk about what that looks like. Starting from, again, the very first question, do you actually need one? It's important to consider if you're ready to, whether you're ready to break out in this direction, is this something that's going to be useful to you? Because there's certain investment costs that are involved. You have to, on a technical level, of course, go out and get a domain and figure out, whether you're a technical person yourself, build the thing or hire somebody or whatever it's going to be. But more than that, it's a place to show credibility that incorporates, again, but goes beyond what you're doing in your company, and that your brand should be involved in this or overlaid on top of this, not as an embodiment of your role. So this is not just, I am doing this thing right now at this company. This is who I am as a leader. This is who I am as a person. This is what my COO brand is. And you're going to see it throughout this website. And in fact, that brand, again, might be separate from your companies. Of course, you hard to separate your role from your company and your brand from your role. But let's be sure to think about this as a way to extend that message. And of course, that might be a little bit of a novel thing. It might be a little bit of a risk for you all, but it's something to think about. Are you ready to go in that direction? And if you are you ready to control that narrative and give a different message or an overlapping message about what your partners or your C-suite or your board or your investors or new hires or whoever they're going to be, they're going to find you? Is this the kind of thing that you want them to see because you want them to know something deeper or more incisive about what you offer the company in the marketplace or what have you? And in doing so, you're necessarily inviting them to engage in a different type of sort of trust engagement, that you're saying, I am this kind of person who is different from beyond what my company suggests that I am or says that I am and what I'm doing every day. And your audience is saying, I want to find somebody like you because I'm looking for somebody like you. And that's how search works. And you're building this kind of, again, trust-based relationship based on that kind of conversation that happens before you even actually talk to one another. Something else that I find really useful about a website that is possible to do on LinkedIn, but maybe not quite as easy, is to talk about other things that you are doing that support your brand, but are not necessarily what you would call sort of professional work. They might be your values and your social impact. And of course, if you're on other organizations' boards and you're volunteering and that stuff, that can go on LinkedIn, but you have more of a chance to talk about it in a broader way that might give a stakeholder a deeper understanding of who you are as a human being. And I think there's something really valuable in that. And again, we've been touching on, but of course, it's not talking about job search very much. But if you are heading in that direction and okay with sharing maybe slightly different or stronger information about yourself, this could very well support a job search in a way that LinkedIn might be a little restrictive, because it's kind of the way everybody does it. So you get to decide how you're going to make this work. And that leads me into how you're going to structure this thing. You've probably all heard of the 5-page sort of typical foundational website. This is number 2 on this list here. You get to own all of the ways you do this. So you can make up a structure that works for you, but typically you're going to have a homepage, which is going to have an introduction, a representation of that brand that you're offering, a blog or pages that are the the meat and potatoes of your thought leadership. So you can include case studies and presentation decks and extended narratives and videos and whatever you want in a way that is a little harder to do, I think, on LinkedIn. If you happen to be consulting, and I don't know what the vibe in the room is about this, so I haven't actually asked, so I don't know. And if I'm stepping on toes, I apologize. But some people have consulting businesses outside of their professional formal engagements. And if you are, you can have that there as your consulting offering. And this is a reasonable place to do it when, in fact, you probably would not want to put that on LinkedIn. That might be a little bit a bridge too far for some people. And with respect to the About page, that's going to be the fourth content type of this 5-page website style. That is a place to put the bio that we were just talking about in the previous section. The one difference is, ordinarily speaking, somebody is reading your bio not in front of you, and they are thinking about you in the third person. If you're going to do this on your website, just take that bio and place it in the first person, get a little bit more active, and have a conversation with or an imagined conversation with your audience. And that's how it's intended to function in this sense. And finally, last page, of course, is your contact information. Make it easy for them to find you in a way that perhaps is not your LinkedIn profile, your company email. If you have a domain, you can always do, your name at whatever domain.com, or you can have a Gmail. All of those things are fine. I think people are pretty flexible about what kind of Gmail or what kind of email people use these days. I wouldn't worry terribly much about it. So that's a quick overview of what a website could look like. And you have to decide, of course, whether you're going to host it yourself or put it on one of the free platforms or whatever. But if you're really getting serious about it, I would say go all in and find your own domain, find your own hosting, because you have so much more control about what goes into it and how you can, whether you adjust it and what you want to put there so that your brand is consistent, so that it's up to date, so that you're not relying on somebody else, you're not relying on another platform. And it still looks like you. So it's not like, I don't know, your domain dot something, whatever the hosting company is .com, you look like yourself. Number 3 on here, I think this is super, super important. When you're deciding whether you want to do this, when you own all the content, you can decide what kind of content you put out there. LinkedIn, again, doesn't give you nearly the flexibility that a personal site will do that. And if you want to showcase white papers and process documents, and if you have a portfolio of visual assets, whatever, Chuck, you were sort of alluding to, not just necessarily a creative element, but you can do all these things, whatever is certainly publicly accessible, and it's okay to put out there. You're welcome to do that. And if you don't have these things, number 4 is really important. If you only have one really cool thing that you want to share, then maybe a website's not for you, and this isn't the right place to house your stuff. But if you have 10 things or 20 things or 30 ideas and you want to keep going, you want to keep engaging your audience, a website's a great place to do it. If you have, again, one really fabulous thing, then maybe LinkedIn is the right place. But do remember that LinkedIn is like you're kind of renting the space there. That's kind of its purpose. You own your content on LinkedIn. Of course, you'll own your content on a website, but you'll own your content on LinkedIn, but grant LinkedIn, what do they call it? A non-exclusive license, I think is what they call it. And I'm no lawyer, but you might want to talk about what's yours and what's somebody else's, what's realistic with respect to your company. I don't want you to ever say, well, Amy said I could do this, and my company said I shouldn't do this, those kinds of things. But if you are publishing on both places, I would say start with your own website, let it get a little traction in Google, and then do something with it on LinkedIn, whether it's the same identical content or a reimagining of it or what have you. That way, you have sort of domain authority with your own site and your own ownership there. I'll leave it to you, by the way, to think about how this plays into the sort of social interaction that you have with your peers, your executive team, your board, whatever it is, because the purpose of this is not to intentionally overshadow anybody or to take over somebody else's authority or to own something that doesn't necessarily belong to you. And put it out there in a public way. It's to amplify your own brand message. So just be mindful of how you put it out there with the right level of sort of the balance between telling the right story and the honest story, and going a little bit over the edge maybe, and perhaps stepping on somebody's toes. I think overall, and I know this is both a sort of a deeper look and a superficial look of what a website can actually do. We all know this. But I think the message is that websites are tremendous work. And if you have the right interest in putting your brand out there and your content out there, it's the right place to do it, apart from your company's sort of own digital space. So think about whether it's the right way to go for you. And if it's not, that's fine. And LinkedIn can serve all kinds of purposes, as I think somebody here is saying in the chat, that LinkedIn is everything to Josh. So Josh, you and I, we should probably talk because you keep showing up in the chat. But there's not one right way, and you don't have to do this. But I think it's something to consider because you can own it and decide how you want it to be. I'm going to move forward because I think this is going to push us into another sort of workshop episode. And this is LinkedIn. And I will say, unlike website, everybody from high school, maybe even, I don't know, high school, I guess, all the way through forever in your career, everybody needs a LinkedIn profile. If you're not one of the 1.2 billion users across the globe, you're not going to have access to the breadth and depth that this platform offers. And if you're going to be, I mean, if you're not there, you're not going to have the visibility that you ought to have in a meaningful way. And a website will never overtake LinkedIn's kind of LinkedIn juice or Google juice or whatever. It'll always show up above your website. I can't rank above my LinkedIn profile for my own stuff. If you do, I would love to know what alchemy that is, but so feel free to share that. One of the things I wanted to mention is in the last year, LinkedIn has redone its algorithm, and you might be reading about this. You might be knowing something about this. It's called 360 brew, like coffee brew. And the algorithm is intended to look 360 degrees at a person's engagement with the platform, with their profile, their posts, their conversations with other people, what they do in groups, how they comment, all the things that they're doing all across the platform. So LinkedIn, I think people think of LinkedIn in a lot of ways as a glorified job board. And I don't even think it's the biggest one anymore. I think that this new algorithm is intended, as these things are, to help users stay in the ecosystem. And of course, they have motivations for doing that. But I think we can use that motivation to our advantage to help our peers and team and investors and board and all the other people, help them find us in the right way and control the message that they are seeing from us. So if LinkedIn's going to do this anyway, let's play their game and let's play it well. Again, fictional person. We're going to talk here about the most important real estate on your LinkedIn profile. And that's not from me. That is what LinkedIn tells us, that the headline, which is about what we're about to talk about, skills and job titles. Together, they are the most attracting pieces of your LinkedIn profile. So crafted well, you get a lot of say in how you play into the methodology, that 360 brew algorithm that LinkedIn is putting out there. So we're going to use the last few minutes of the talk today to take advantage of that branding work that you did earlier. And I see some people are putting what they found into the chat, which is super cool. And have a different chat, this one freed up so you can actually copy it from the beginning. Have it give you a few options that you can use to amplify, rewrite, strengthen, and structure this headline that is so crucial. Because of course, it's not just that sort of attractive capability, but it's the first thing people are going to see when they find you in a search or when they go to your profile. It's literally at the top. As you know, LinkedIn provides a couple dozen content types or content sections, so headline and about and job titles and descriptions and honors and awards, education, all the kinds of things that go in there. And it's really hard for people who are unaccustomed to sort of building out a brand in this way to just section out one thing. And it's easy to get lost in all of those things, saying, thinking you have to address all of them all at once. But if you're going to address anything in your profile, rebuild anything in your profile, it's this headline that I think makes the most sense. And it's, again, going to give your audience the quickest understanding of your COO brand. That plus your potentially the banner ahead of it, which is not searchable in any way. But the two of those together should give a really comprehensive view of who you are and what your COO brand is meant to be. Okay. So let's talk about what LinkedIn does. If you do nothing, this is like a cardinal sin in resume writing, but if you do nothing in your LinkedIn profile, you'll get assigned in your headline job title at company. It's not that it's not true, but it is incredibly boring and very generic, and you can do so much more than that. So I would say whatever you do something better than this. Do something better than job title at company. The tab. Thank you, Connie. Thank you. Does the verified option in LinkedIn actually hold any weight? Yes, but I think that's only in the context of you versus scam. So Diana asked, does the verified option in LinkedIn actually hold any weight? There's so much in the way of scams out there. If you can verify who you are, that should give at least some additional credibility. Honestly, one of the biggest things that you can do is put your photo in. You are a real person. It's funny, your photo does not belong on your resume. It belongs on your LinkedIn profile. It's just a way of adding that kind of credibility. Anyway, back to this. Please don't do this. Check this out here. So LinkedIn has a kind of native AI that will write some things for you. But I don't say this lightly, and I'm not the only person to believe this. The AI capabilities are not that strong. You have other tools. If you want to use AI, I guess you can. There's other things that you can use, and you can play with them, and you get sort of more interaction with what that's going to be, as we will just do in just a second. But the one round of things that you get from within the AI platform on LinkedIn doesn't give a whole lot, and it's really not that different from what you would get natively. So I think you can all do better than the Write with AI option. And when you do this well, you'll get a broader look. And I think your LinkedIn is something that it's not something that I would just trust straight out of AI. This is something I would want you to manipulate and add to. But I think you'll get some interesting additions that make sense. And usually what you get is sort of a title and what you are and what your brand is, what you do, and then maybe one or two wins if you can fit them there. Remember, you're only going to get 220 characters, and that includes spaces. And LinkedIn is hard and fast. It won't let you save if you exceed that. So please think about that when you're building this, and try to do what you can to put the right keywords that matter to you. There's no great list of keywords in the sky that we all should be tapping into. It's what matters to you, what you want to be found for. That should wind up in your headline. So for today, all right. So well, Chuck is the greatest COO of all time, which I think is a safe bet. Does anybody have anything they want to share about their experience with this particular exercise? I know we don't have a ton of time, and I don't want to keep you all here, but I'd love to hear you have something to share.
I'll go.
I will say it makes me dig deeper on thinking about, less of a polished overview and more of real tangible accomplishments, if you will. It takes some work, though, to sit here and, I'm trying to answer it. It still takes some work to do so, but I think some of the questions are really pretty cool from the prompt.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you're finding it a useful activity. I really am.
Go ahead, Bob. Bring us home with comments.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I was talking in our breakout room. It feels like, it definitely took the first part into the second and condensed it, which I thought was nice, but I need to give more thought into the first part. You were talking about challenging it, and because really it just said, all right, here are the two things you mentioned, and there's your headline with these two things condensed. And I don't know if that's really what I want to share. So
Totally
the
fair.
hardest part is I guess figuring out the yay me things that you want to talk about.
Yeah.
That's totally legitimate. And if you feel like this particular chat or this path isn't going in the direction you want it to, you can start a new one. There's no reason you can't run this, 3 or 4 or 5 times and pick different aspects of your professional persona that you want to put out there. See what it, maybe the answer is, well, that's how things usually are, somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
So in the context of today's conversation, if your leadership or your board sees you only as help or support, you have the opportunity to shift that conversation, demonstrate your wisdom, show your authority in the business, all through this version of yourself, the COO brand that you're developing, and creating the right messaging along those lines, creating the right professional assets into what I call a career portfolio, can be the turning point that you are looking for to, in an enduring way, to demonstrate your true authority. So as you return to your roles, go back to your day, I want you to remember this. When you build your LinkedIn profile or your bio or your website, whatever it is, don't dial your value back to I built a thing or I managed a team. Be willing to take it up a level, to broaden it to the kinds of strategic insights that demonstrate that you're an indispensable executive who runs the business well. And thank you all so much for staying with me all the way through. It has been a pleasure to talk to you today, to work through some of the AI sprints. It sounds like there's lots of work to be done, both in building them apparently and in running them for yourselves. But I especially liked hearing the aha moments. This was really fun for me to see kind of your light bulbs go off. As we discussed, we're working toward closing the gap between who you are as a COO and a leader, and how you show up to your boards and how you show up to your peers and to the marketplace. And I think you have a huge opportunity to do that and to strengthen that COO brand and make it truly your own. So again, Chuck, thank you so much. Fiona, thank you so much for having me here with the COO Forum. If you want to keep this momentum going, if you need help translating specific operational wins or strategic language, let me know. I'm here. You can find me to set up a one-on-one if you want. My calendar's on the screen. I hope to speak with each and every one of you. So thank you so much.
And thank you, Amy. If everyone could come off of mute and give Amy a round of applause. Thank you so much. Thank you for helping us
Thanks, Amy.
think about ourselves for a change. Sometimes we get so embedded in our business that we don't take the time to think about ourselves. So thank you for that, Amy.